Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. With all the cards from Power of the Elements being revealed, we now have a full picture of the story being told in this set, and a fuller understanding of the story at large. So, as is tradition here on www.youtube.com/GoldenNovaYugioh, I'll be covering the new archetype that's been introduced to us, before focusing in on how the story is being advanced on other cards associated with the lore, and explaining them as well. But this time, things are going to be a little different, because I've gotten my hands on some extra information that'll make things a lot clearer. The release of Hidden Arsenal Chapter 1 was a boon to all of us lore fiends outside the OCG, because it was actual canon information that was being conveyed through official product. But it's just a taste of the kind of lore information that those who participate in the OCG get. Namely, the valuable books, documents that outline the story in a much more detailed way than the cards ever have. And as it turns out, members of my Discord hunted down a fan-translated copy of Valuable Book EX2, which contains a wealth of knowledge that clears up the order of events while proving and disproving many theories I had concocted. And I'll be sure to link it in the description below, as well as other resources I used, because they're fascinating reads, and the more ways people have to access this document, the better. So between talking about the new archetype and how the story has progressed so far, I'll be covering all the pertinent information from Valuable Book EX2, so that we're on the right track. And trust me, you're gonna want to pay attention, because there's something I was pretty stumped on until I had access to this very book. But before we can have that sweet, sweet lore treat, we have to eat our vegetables, and like those leafy greens, this section is going to give us the vitamins and minerals we need to take on a new format. Presenting Splights, a new Thunder archetype that's already seeing incredible results in the OCG. Name-wise, they're pretty close to Spright, which would make them the second archetype that's named for a fey creature of European folklore. However, since everything in this game has a double meaning, they're also based on the astronomical term Spright, which is a blanket term for a number of electrical discharge phenomena that occur in the upper atmosphere, with many of the monsters taking their individual names from a specific kind of sprite. But enough of the etymology, what do these cards actually do? Well, that's what the next part of the video is all about. Let's charge up our devices so we can see what's on them, find some other gadgets that can shock the competition, then see how these little ball lightnings fit in with the rest of the lore. It's time to spark some interest in Splight. But before we continue, I wanted to change the call to action this time around because we're doing something very special this weekend. If you're watching the premiere when this is over, make sure you go to twitch.tv/GoldenNovaYugioh, because I'll be doing a follow-up stream to a fundraising one I was doing with Noah Jenk earlier today. We're raising money for the Texas Equal Access Fund, which looks to provide emotional and financial support to people who are seeking abortion care. With the impending overturning of Roe v. Wade, they're gonna need as much help as they can get. So please, come on by, watch some fun Yu-Gi-Oh stuff, participate in some challenges, give generously, and if you're watching beyond the premiere, I'll have a link down in the description that you can use to give as well, because this is not ending anytime soon. Thank you all so much for watching and for your continued support, and now, back to the video. So, what's the deal with Splights? Well, they're a series of thunder monsters that bounce between dark and fire attribute, and they're all about the number 2. Are you in the main deck? You're level 2. Xyz? Rank 2. Link? Rating 2. They love that stuff, and they focus on supporting other level 2 monsters, and they want you to be as aggro about it as possible. Let's start with Splight Blue, a dark monster with 1100 attack and 1000 defense, and if you control a level or rank 2 monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, which you can do once per turn. And if this card is special summoned, you can add a Splight monster from your deck to your hand, except another copy of itself. We've seen this kind of stuff in other archetypes, and it's always a great sight. Blue here is extension while grabbing new cards, and spoilers, all of our main deck Splights can also be special summoned from the hand, so you'll get to severely pop off. But of course, all of this pales in comparison to their impeccable drip. I wonder what kind of pop-up shop fell out of one of those holes that carries this. Splight Jet is a dark monster with 1300 attack and 700 defense, and can be special summoned from your hand if you control a level or rank 2 monster once per turn. And if this card is special summoned, you can add a Splight Speller Trap from your deck to your hand. Now, one of them special summons a Splight from your deck, but you can also get stuff like removal and attack boosting. So if you need to hasten your game plan, it's hard to get faster than with a Jet. Splight Pixies is a dark monster with 1400 attack and defense, and can be special summoned from your hand if you control a level or rank 2 monster once per turn. Also, during damage calculation, if your other level, rank, or link 2 monster battles an opponent's monster as a quick effect, you can send this card from your hand or field to the grave, and your battling monster gains attack and defense equal to that opponent's monster's current attack. So while Pixie can help get material onto the board for your plays, it's also an honest that works for attacking and defending, which is pretty sweet. I do like flexibility in my cards. And from the look of all those gadgets, so does Pixie's. Is that a gun? Splight Carrot is a fire monster with 1000 attack and 1900 defense, and you can special summon this card from your hand if you control a level or link 2 monster once per turn. So remember, if it's a dark Splight, you can special summon them with levels and ranks, and the fires are summoned with levels and link ratings. And when your opponent activates a spell or trap card or effect as a quick effect, you can tribute another level, rank, or link 2 monster to negate that effect, and if you tributed a rank or link 2 monster, you can also destroy it. So if you tributed one of your main deck monsters, it just stops the effect, but tributing an extra deck monster would actually get rid of it. But honestly, most of the spells and traps you want to be negating won't stick around for long anyways, so it's not too important to pay the premium. It also means that my analogy at the beginning about eating our vegetables was a bit more on the nose than I anticipated. Splight Red is a fire monster with 1200 attack and 1800 defense, and you can special summon them from your hand if you control a level or link 2 monster once per turn. And when your opponent activates a monster effect as a quick effect, you can tribute another level, rank, or link 2 monster to negate that effect, and if you tributed a rank or link 2 monster, you also destroy it. Now, this one you should probably tribute an Xyz or Link monster for. I guess if it's something like Ash Blossom, it doesn't really matter, but you definitely want to do it to get rid of negation bodies or more resilient hand traps like Psyframe Gear Gamma and Nibiru. And the best part, you can say you caught your opponent's monster Splight red-handed. It'll be great. Alright, that's all of our main deck monsters, and now it's time for the extra deck ones. Starting with Gigantic Splight, a rank 2 Dark Xyz monster with 1600 attack and defense, requiring any 2 level 2 monsters as material. However, link 2 monsters can be treated as level 2 monsters for this card's Xyz summon, and that's pretty wacky. Link monsters are quite possibly the most generic of the extra deck types, and of them, the link 2s are the most generic and widely used of that toolbox. Nightmares, Charmers, and a variety of utility monsters from Cross Sheep to Pentastag. So expect to see this outside of Splites for some time to come, especially because if a Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, and or Link monster is a material on this card's original attack is doubled, putting it at 3200, larger than a lot of negation bodies that live in the extra deck without having to activate its own effect. Also, during your main phase, you can activate an effect that keeps both players from special summoning monsters for the rest of the turn, except level, rank, or link 2 monsters, then detaches a material, and if you do, special summons a level 2 monster from your deck. So you can summon any of your on-theme monsters, but you can also get frogs, Melfies, or Jamas. Ugh, I'm never gonna hear the end of this, am I? Splight Elf is a Link 2 Fire Link monster with 1400 attack, requiring any 2 monsters, including at least 1 level, rank, or Link 2 monster, and can't be used as Link material the turn it's Link summoned. Your opponent can't target monsters this card points to with card effects, and during any main phase as a quick effect, you can target a level 2 monster in your grave, or if your opponent controls a monster, you can instead target a rank or Link 2 monster and special summon it. So while Gigantic gets you monsters out of your deck, Elf is here to revive them from your grave, and it's hard to overstate just how strong that is, considering the kinds of cards we can summon. Even on theme, we have 2 monsters that search, 2 that negate, and 1 that's an honest, and you're doing this on yours and your opponent's turn every turn. And that's before we get to their sweet space equipment. I've gotta say, Elf is certainly out of this world. Alright, that's all of our monsters. Let's move on to those spell cards. I would include trap cards since Jet can search them, but we don't have any yet. Splight Gamma Burst is a quick play spell that grants all of your level, rank, and link 2 monsters you currently control a 1400 attack and defense point boost until the end of the turn. And during your main phase, you can banish this card from your grave to give 1400 attack to just one of your level, rank, or link 2 monsters until the end of your opponent's turn, but you can only use 1 effect per turn and only once per turn. And I've gotta say, After seeing the same kind of cascading stat boost effects from cards like Megalith Full and Elemental Hero Sunriser, a card that can boost your stats by that much across all of your monsters is a potential game ender. And while it's not as overwhelmingly powerful, the Grave effect gives you a little extra boost to help end a game or to punch through a defensive wall. And that makes sense because based on my comic book knowledge, this Gamma Burst is really gonna help you Hulk out. Splight Smashers is a quick play spell that banishes a Springan, Therion's, or Splight card from your hand or grave, then activates one of the following effects. You special summon a Springan's monster from your deck, special summon a Therion's monster from your grave, or banish both a level, rank, or link 2 monster you control and a card your opponent controls. Oh boy, the lore implications of this card are wild, but we'll get to those in a bit. Now, Springans and Therions don't really have a lot of, read any, level, rank, or link 2 monsters, but insofar as Splites are concerned, it is non-targeting banishing removal. It does end up banishing 2 of your cards in the process, but hey, nothing costs too much for our deck, right? Our last card is Splight Starter, a quick play spell with a lot more lore implications. It special summons a Splight monster from your deck, and if you do, you lose life points equal to its original attack. And for the rest of the turn after this effect resolves, you can't special summon monsters except for level, rank, or link 2 ones. So you're not going to be getting away with losing anything less than 1,000 life points, but it doesn't negate the effect of what you summon, so if you deploy blue, then you're off to the races. But it is a starter card, so I shouldn't be surprised. Alright, that's all the Splight cards, but what do we do with them? Well, the glut of special summoning and attack buffs means we're all in on aggro. A regular old Splight deck will want to quickly assemble lethal by going wide before gamma bursting to go tall, all anchored by Elf and Gigantic getting you all the pieces you need. However, most of our effects support the number 2, so we actually have a lot of themes we can splash it into to drastically change the playstyle. So what themes can we play to help them out? As mentioned earlier, frogs are a great addition that can give you a strong control game to match your aggro. Combo them with longtime collaborator Paleozoic, and you've got a back row that can interrupt your opponent, and a totally awesome to act as an Omni-Negate. You think 2200 attack is tough to get over in those conditions? Try dealing with a post-Gamma Burst 3600 attack Toad. Not to mention how it turns your puny 1200 attack Paleos into 2600 attack Terrors. Melfi's no stranger to teaming up with giant mechs, but this time, the mechs are helping you instead of wiping the whole board. If you can't find the appropriate Melfi, Gigantic can summon it out of your deck, while Elf can revive them to punish your opponent for committing the most grave sin imaginable: summoning monsters. Now, you can't summon Zeus if you use Gigantic or Starter to get your plays off the ground, but if it's a choice between setting up a board and not doing anything, it's nice to have these little sparks in your back pocket. How about Thunder support? Well, there isn't too much worthwhile that lines up with Splites. Thunder Dragons are exclusively not level 2, and the same goes for any of the good Batterymen. Some Summer Summoner is basically outclassed by Elf. The only scenario in which it's better than Elf is if you wanted to summon Thunderclap Skywolf, but that's a pretty big investment that doesn't really advance your actual game plan. Meanwhile, Elf can revive Totally Awesome if it's used its effect this turn, because get this, Totally Awesome does not have a hard once per turn. Heck, even out of the Nemesis cards, the Thunder one doesn't even fit here, but the Pyro one does, as Flag can recycle the Splites you banished for Smashers. This works a lot better in a world where Arch-Nemesis Protoss is legal, but don't rule out Ashatos. You'll need to get one more type into the grave, but once you do, you can shut off Dragon Summons, which puts a damper on any Dragon Link strategy you might run into. Not to mention branded lines that have to go through Lubellion just aren't gonna work. As for a silly tech pick, I'm going with Thunder Dragon Fusion because I want to see how prank kids can play into all this. Because Aqua is itself a level 2 monster, any prank kid into Meow Meow can get us the whole line, and if we field Aqua at any point along the way, we can start special summoning Splites out of our hand and unlock that whole half of our deck. So as long as we hold off on using Gigantic or Starter, we build up a whole arsenal of interruptions, and if we have Thunder Dragon Fusion, then we get a free Battle Butler now and the search of any Splight later. And if we put Elf on board, we'll start getting back our Prank Kid Link 2s from the grave. We can summon back Bow Wow Bark, adding 2 cards back from our grave to our hand while insulating our Prank Kids on our opponent's turn, and then during our turn we can summon Dodo Doodle Doo to get even more cards. And if our opponent doesn't have a monster on board, making it so we can only summon our level 2s, then I guess we'll just have to be satisfied with summoning negation bodies like Carrot or Red. Oh no. Okay, that's all I have to say about Splight. Normally, I throw things up in the air about how viable they might be, but they're already seeing great results in the OCG, so you want to make sure you get your hands on these cards as soon as possible. Now then, let's take a detour and talk about Valuable Book EX2, and what it can tell us about the current storyline. So, since we just talked about Splites, what in the world is going on with this B story? Why did we all of a sudden start focusing on Kitt and the Springans while there's a catastrophe going on at the Swordsoul Summit? Well, it turns out that the Valuable Book sheds light not only on this, but also on a question that I've been asking since the first episode of the Albaz lore series. What in the good gravy is going on with the Tri-Brigade's weapons? They all seem to be powered by this blue energy, and it's been so prevalent and focused on in the art that I hardly thought it was a coincidence. And like I thought, it actually has a very important function. It represses the power of the stigmata, thus giving the Tri-Brigade an even playing field against the miracles provided by Maximus. But where does it all come from? Well, it appears to have originated from a land of iron that the Tri-Brigade settled long ago, and after Ecclesia and Albaz departed from Golgonda, Kitt decided they weren't going to stand idly by and went off on an expedition, returning to the land of iron to discover more about this special weapon. And who should be in this land but the Therions, and the text gives us some more information about them as well. The Saucer Colosseum appeared from beyond the hole, and the Argyro system used to be just a saucer repair AI, but ever since they've been siphoning energy from that volcano, it's taken on a very fiery fighting spirit, and as Kitt would tell it, they can't get what they came here for if they don't defeat the residents of the Land of Iron first, and their competition takes the form of the Therions, warriors created by the Argyro system using material from defeated combatants to strengthen themselves. But that's not the only world-building information we get, oh no. We also get a better understanding of the relationship between Dogmatika and the Despians. It clears up that the ritual being conducted by Maximus in the Art of Dogmatic Calamity is them bringing about something called the Day of Gospel, which takes the stigmata, the mark of power bestowed by Maximus via the Nexus to the population of Dogmatika, and unseals it, transforming it into a brand, one that's tied directly into the power of the whole, and thus turning every citizen of Dogmatika into one of the Despia. Now, this initially made me think that the comedy and tragedy of Despia were just random citizens, but it's actually more likely that they're the procession that showed in the art of White Relic of Dogmatika. Part of the text says that from the relic that had transformed into the White Knight of Dogmatika, which we now know as Despian Queritus, crawled repulsive yet beautiful creatures, which I suppose fits these things. One of the reasons why the relics like Nexus and Fleur's armor are also transforming into Despians is because they're actually inhabited by the souls of previous saints of Dogmatika, and they're now animating the relics to do their bidding. Maximus also partakes of this power to become Dramaturge, so they weren't using the guise of the highest authority of the church to hide this maniacal looking form, they just transformed into it willingly, counter to my previous theories. At least so far as we know. What it doesn't expound upon is anything about Aluber. They just kind of show up as the Day of Gospel is happening, and they can turn into Masquerade, which is an odd detail that we'll get into later. There's also some information about Tri-Brigade I wasn't privy to, though this comes primarily from Valuable Book 1. Apparently, they're the remnants of outcasts from a variety of villages throughout the Abyss. It's the classic JRPG, we can't trust the beastmen trope. And while wandering the world, they eventually found each other and formed their own tribe, settling in the Land of Iron. However, after seeing all the messed up stuff going on in Dogmatika, Shreg rallied a bunch of them together to fight them. We even know why they were in Dogmatika the day Albaz fell from the sky. They were invading the capital to rescue their comrades who had been captured, which gave them all the more reason to protect Albaz and Ecclesia. There's a big emphasis about how they can sympathize with being cast out from society, and because of the way Albaz was being treated by the church, as well as how Ecclesia was likely going to be kicked out because of the compassion they showed to Albaz, it really tugged at their heartstrings. What about the Springans? Well, we've got that too. Apparently, the ones we know today are an offshoot of another tribe that was all about getting fuel and burning it up and doing it all over again to burn as bright as they could. But some members of that tribe didn't like the way they did things, so they split off and ended up in Golgonda, where several holes there ended up spitting out industrial material that these people bonded themselves with, and thus we got the Springans. Now, based on what we know about Argyro, the land the Springans came from is likely the Land of Iron. This is further supported by two things. One, it seems like this tribe is familiar with the now matured Shreg that comes across them in the desert as they're traveling, which implies that they came from the same space, split off, and are now reunited. Two, I've pointed out the similarities between Argyro and the Springans before, as well as how the Springans and Splights have a similar naming convention. It also doesn't hurt that both are generally non-solid organisms possessing solid bodies, one made of plasma, one made of soot. But what would cause such a split? Well, if Argyro's obsession was to gain fuel and burn continuously over and over again, that ties into the fact that they're tied into an active volcano. And that energy gets used towards creating gladiatorial fighters to fight more things. Now, the Springans, they like to be flashy and explosive as well, but theirs is in the form of things like fireworks. Their explosions, for lack of a better term, are meant to entertain everyone, not to be used as weapons against each other. This also solidifies that Sargus is connected with the Therions, either being one outright, or a deactivated one that's now being possessed by a Springan. Its level is different from the rest of the Springans, but much more in line with the Therions. Their ability to grant 500 attack to a Springan Xyz they're attached to is also very similar to how the Therions give 700 attack to who they're equipped to say nothing of Sargus and Regulus both being level 8 machines with very closely reversed stats. But perhaps the biggest tie between them is that Sargus fits in with the naming conventions of the Therions in two ways. There's Therion's King Regulus, Springan's Captain Sargus, but they also tie in with representing members of the Western Zodiac. Sargus is a star in the Scorpius constellation, Regulus is a star in the Leo constellation, Ein is part of the Tauros constellation, the list goes on. And if you look at the Splights, you'll see that each of them has a symbol associated with one of the Western Zodiac as well. So not only does this have an interesting and unsettling connection with the Constellars of all things, it also means I get to bring up Homestuck, and y'all like Homestuck, right? We also get confirmation on the order of events for cards after Ecclesia and Albaz leave Dogmatika. The Springans recognize the two as a threat initially, but after their capture, Kitt recognizes Mercurier and gives them the all clear, but they must first pass an initiation trial, which Albaz and Ecclesia complete with flying colors, and that's what we see in Springan's booty. Then they come across the Great Serpent of Golgonda, which was not sent by Dogmatika, but was the big cheese of the desert that ended up eating too many of the holes that were scattered around the place and became corrupted and feral. One thing I was not correct about was how Albion changed into their shrouded form. Initially, I assumed it was the lightning from Fleur's blade, because we needed some kind of explanation for why Fleur's brand, as well as Theo and Aiden's, had been sealed. Instead, it turns out that it was music that soothed the savage beast. Albion calmed down from its rampage after hearing Ecclesia call their name, the name given to them by, well, Ecclesia. Gosh, that's cute. This also debunks my theory that Albaz's change into Albion was sparked by a last-minute, desperate plea for power, tapping into a well of potential sleeping deep inside them. Rather, it was his stigmata unlocking from the Day of Gospel, as it happened around that time. We also clear up what in the heck happens with Fleur at this point in the story. Previously, I was confused that Fleur would leave Dogmatika, meet Ecclesia and Albaz, and then all of a sudden disappear when they went to the Swordsoul Summit. As it turns out, Fleur does meet Ecclesia and Albaz in the desert, we have the art for that, and at that point, Fleur does decide to go back to Dogmatika to put an end to Maximus's schemes. Albaz and Ecclesia decided to look for a way to not just suppress the brands, but to seal them for good, so they head to the Swordsoul Summit. Notably, the text says that Ecclesia and Albaz are headed towards those who saved Fleur. So while I feel like the suppressive weapons of the Tri-Brigade should have had an impact on their stigmata not fully awakening into brands, it appears that the sealing of these stigmata was done by the Swordsoul, likely shown in the art of Swordsoul Emergence. It also explains how they themselves would become part of the Swordsoul archetype, learning to channel their soul's power through their weapons. However, I'm not sure how the Swordsoul came to be in Dogmatika to save Fleur in the first place. The only other explanation is that Fleur somehow left Dogmatika, got to the summit, had their stigmata sealed, and met Ecclesia on the way back all before Ecclesia and Albaz got further than the desert of Golgonda. The text doesn't currently have an answer for this, and I couldn't find any, so it really just ends up raising more questions than answers. However, this does confirm that what we see in the artwork of Icejade Cradle is a vision of Fleur, not Fleur themselves, which is supported by these strange vision bubbles in Tremor's artwork. This brings us to the Swordsoul. Like we knew before, they guard the Icejade, and in return, they grant the Swordsoul the weapons made of themselves. It turns out that the Inian Cradle is itself a larger organism that created Empress Cosmiclore as a representative, who would in turn make the other Icejades. However, Ecclesia and Albaz can only visit the Icejade Cradle after being verified by Chunjun, whose horn can tell good from evil. And speaking of evil, something I was right about was that Long Yuan was a dirty, no-good traitor this whole time. However, the Swordsouls have Chunjun, which can detect evil, so what gives? Well, get this. Long Yuan split his sword into a light and dark half and gave the dark half to Mo Yi, one of his disciples. Now, why Mo Yi wasn't cast out long ago because of this, I have no clue. But when it comes time to tip the scales, Long Yuan takes back their dark sword and assumes their true form, Qijing Long Yuan, clashing against the collective efforts of the Swordsoul Sovereign and the Icejade Guardian construct, Kingfisher. While all of that's happening, Aluber decides to show up as the Despia launch a full-scale assault on the Swordsoul and Icejade. Previously, the mountains had been protected by a mist that diverted anyone who tried to invade, but the new power granted to Dramaturge overpowered that, so teleporting in via the holes was now possible. Aluber began to use the power of the hole to sap Albaz of their dragon-changing power, which I assumed Aluber already had because of their masquerade form. One could argue that Masquerade is technically a fiend, not a dragon, but neither are a lot of Albaz's forms, Bergrand and Splind being the primary examples. Do those simply not count, even though they have dragon in the name? Though this could be me assuming a have-not dichotomy where there isn't one. Based on the images of branded in white and branded in red, it might be that Aluber doesn't lack that kind of power, rather he just wants Albaz's as well. But regardless of what the reasoning might be, Aluber steals this power, transforming into Lubellion, and uses their power to finish off both the Swordsoul Sovereign and the Icejade Empress. But not wanting their power to go to waste, to give them one last fighting chance to defeat Aluber and the Despian army, they give their power to the now dragon-transformingless Albaz, turning them into Mirror Jade the Ice Blade Dragon. And so, Mirror Jade and Lubellion, Albaz and Aluber begin fighting, and because of this, eventually fuse into a single being, Alba Renatus. Gee, I wonder where we've seen this plot beat about two dragons who look the same fusing into one creature before. Bonus points, the evil one is using a mysterious power to corrupt things into other forms. At the same time, Fleur is in Dogmatika, looking to get even with Dramaturge. Fleur strikes what they think is a fatal blow against Dramaturge, but it was all an illusion made by White Relic of Dogmatika, who, as it turns out, is the reanimated body of the first saint of Dogmatika, Quem. A piece of info that's thrown in that doesn't have any immediate relevancy is that there are 663 brands of saints in Dogmatika, each one possessing a sacred relic that's steeped in despair, and that the remaining two will become sweet nourishment. So it looks like Dogmatika/Despia is looking to reach the magical number 666, and getting back Ecclesia and Fleur to add to their collection is key. Though that makes me wonder, if Fleur is Saint 664, and Ecclesia is Saint 665, who's Saint 666 going to be? This brings us to the present day, and so we can talk about what happens in Power of the Elements. Let's begin with the Kitt storyline. The last thing we saw was Sargus struggling against Regulus, who is the final combatant of the Therion's gauntlet. Now, we don't see who wins the stand-up, but I assume it's Sargus, because in the image of Splight's starter, Argyro looks very, very mad, almost like their prized contender had lost a very important match. We know now that it's possessed of a fierce fighting spirit, and it probably doesn't take losing very well, and as such, decided to take matters into its own hands. And so, we get the Splights. On top of that, the Therions have another combatant we haven't seen before, as well as giving Regulus a second wind. The first monster is Therion's Empress Aluber, a level 8 Earth reptile monster with 2100 attack and 2500 defense. It works like all the other Therions, and their effect is that you can discard a card to target a Therion's monster in your spell and trap zone and special summon it. This can help you spam out more Therions for combat, as well as being a discard outlet to help you put more Therions, or monsters in general, into the grave to help deploy your other Therions. It can also be used to special summon a level 8 Therion, helping to make rank 8 monsters with Aluber, which could make a very familiar Springans Xyz monster. We also have Therion Irregular, a level 10 Dark Machine monster with 1600 attack and 2800 defense, giving it the reverse battle stats of Regulus. This may seem like a big downgrade, but give it a minute and I think you'll change your tune. Unlike the other Therions, which can be special summoned from the hand by equipping another Therion or like-typed monster from the grave, Irregular has you targeting up to 3 Therions without the option for a type-specific match, and equipping the targeted monster to it as you special summon Irregular. With 3 Therions giving 700 attack each, this puts Irregular at an astonishing 3700 attack, loaded up with 3 Therion's effects. They can also discard an Endless Engine Argyro to destroy all cards your opponent controls. Yeah, a total board wipe, that is ridiculous. Unfortunately, this is not an effect you can give to your other Therions, but that's where its next effect comes in. While equipped to a monster, say by being targeted for the summon of a Therion, you can special summon a Regular, then equip the monster it was previously equipped to Irregulars. The lightning coursing through Irregular pretty clearly hints that it's the Splights that are juicing it up, which is once again another parallel between them and Sargus. Regulus's face didn't previously have a snout, but this could be a replacement part, since we know the Therions use their defeated enemies for parts, which implies that Sargus punched Regulus so hard their face came off. They couldn't even get the jaw right, which is why it's now made of lightning. The art for Splight Smashers shows a free-for-all going on between the Therions, Springans, and Splights. Irregulars is up against one of the Rockies in the foreground, while it looks like Empress and Gigantic are clashing. Sargus is watching, but I'm not entirely sure what to make of this. Maybe Aluber sees this as a bridge too far, but without more concrete information, I'm stumped. However, I do like that the Splight Smashers does at least give us a pretty strong confirmation of the 3 themes' connections. We'll have to wait until next time to see how their story develops. Shifting our focus back to the Swordsoul peak, things have not gotten much better. The combination of Albaz and Aluber, Alba Renatus has been born, while the Icejade Empress Cosmiclore has died, leaving behind Aegerin, the next in line as the scion of the Icejade's power. The imagery here is cripplingly somber. The image of a small child watching their mother crumble to dust, with the stark white background widening our perspective of distance between them from a few feet to a chasm of loneliness. We don't see any more of Aegerin in this story, specifically, but we do see their possible retaliation. An Icejade creation much like Kingfisher. Icejade creation Aegirocasis is a level 7 Water Aqua Tuner monster with 2000 attack and defense, and a monster equipped with Aegirocasis gains 400 attack and defense for each banished monster. While in the hand or grave as a quick effect, you can target an Icejade monster you control and equip Aegirocasis to it, and while this card is equipped to a monster, you can special summon it. However, you can only use one of these 2 effects per turn, and only once per turn. Having an Icejade that functions out of the grave works very well with the Icejades that want you to discard cards, and with the amount of banishing you'll be doing on your own terms, that attack boost can actually get out of hand very quickly. But the most striking thing about this card is the visuals. Unlike Kingfisher, which embodies this graceful abstraction, a curving, ethereal form evocative of some kind of marine life, but not defined by any in particular, this Icejade creation is grounded and sharp, based on the ancient arthropod Aegirocasis that lived 480 million years ago in our time. Each of its spines end in the black and red primal marking of the Icejade, but here it's different. The brutal contrast of the calm blue and white ice and the black and red tips make it look like each one is coated in blood. If this really is Aegerin's first creation as the new wielder of the Icejade's power, it's hard to fault them for bringing to life such a grotesque creation. As for Alba Renatus, it appears that Albaz isn't meant to be under Aluber's thumb for long. Branded Separation is a normal trap that tributes a fusion monster, then targets 2 non-fusion monsters that are banished and/or are in either player's grave, and special summon one of them to each side of the field. Or if you tributed a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as material to activate this card, you can special summon both targets to your field in defense position instead. So it's like a defusion, but you aren't limited to the monsters used as fusion material, and you get to keep both if you tributed an Albaz Dragon. Though, funnily enough, if you summon to both players' side of the field, you can summon them however you want, whereas if you tribute an Albaz Dragon, they have to come back in defense position, so keep that in mind. The art shows Albaz erupting from what seems to be the red orb on Alba Renatus' chest, but we don't see how that comes to pass. The way they're falling, facing towards the orb, doesn't feel like Albaz cut themselves out, rather that they were ejected unexpectedly. I theorize that Aluber is behind this, having absorbed everything they need from Albaz and not wanting them to find a way to interfere, so Albaz was released, now in their humanoid form. And we get a better look at them with their new monster card, Albaz the Ashen. Like their original form, they're a level 4 Dark Dragon monster with 1800 attack and 0 defense, and this card's name becomes Fallen of Albaz while on the field or in the grave. While you have a level 8 fusion monster in your grave, this card gains 200 attack for each monster in your grave. Also, your opponent can't target monsters you control with card effects except this one. And if any number of monsters you control leave the field by an opponent's card effect, while both this card and any number of fusion monsters are in your grave, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card. This is actually incredible fusion material for branded fusion, as you can send this to the grave alongside base Albaz for Lubellion, and now you have 2 Albazes, but with different effects. It has strong revival, and the attack boost it can get is kind of outrageous. Only 5 monsters gets it up to 2800, and they're going to need every point of it because they are in trouble. They're now armed only with a fragment of the Ice Jade blades they had as Mirror Jade, and using it to stand up against the brutal advantage the Despia have is going to be nigh impossible. Especially since Albaz is missing their signature gems. Ever since we started, there's been a white gem on Albaz's hands, head, and chest. And while we can't see the chest in this art, we can see that the other slots are now empty, likely a result of Aluber's theft. This is also reinforced by the mechanics, as the original version of Albaz is capable of fusion summoning, but this one is not. Another mechanical nod also comes from the name Ashen, something it shares with the first fusion form of them we ever saw, Titaniclad the Ash Dragon. While the boost isn't the same, they both still gain an attack bonus based on other factors, and where Ash Dragon was unaffected by extra deck monster activated effects that turn their fusion summoned, Albaz the Ashen keeps other monsters from being targeted by card effects. It's not a clean 1-for-1 transmission of effects, but it has attack gain and some kind of protection. I feel like that's more than a coincidence given their name. And if we keep looking through the imagery, things get more and more bleak. See, hiding on Albaz's shoulder is a single Springan in soot form, and there shouldn't really be any Springans with them. The only one they brought with them was the Rocky in Ecclesia's hammer, which, looking at the background, we can see shattered, part of the skull lying ominously on the ground, another worrisome sign about our hero's odds of success. This brings us to our last card, Branded Central Dogmatika, a continuous spell that has 2 triggered effects. If you special summon a ritual monster with a spell effect and no other monster, except during the damage step, you can look at either extra deck and send a monster from it to the grave. If you special summon a fusion monster with a spell effect and no other monsters, except during the damage step, you can target that monster, and until the end of the turn, it gains attack equal to its original attack, but it cannot attack except to attack an opponent's attack position monster. For Dogmatika, this is another way to rip cards out of the extra deck, and since you can point that effect at yourself, you can send a Herald of the Arclight for more extension, while giving you the option to take a peek at what your opponent is playing. For fusions, you can turn your Mirror Jade into a 6,000 attack point monster, but it actually has to fight a monster, swinging in directly is not an option. Once again, the imagery is haunting. In the background, we can see Despia and Priscinian, previously the Dogmatika Nexus, its doors swung wide to reveal an Iron Maiden coated in blood. Fleur's blood. Ecclesia mourns the death of her dear friend, while Kuem, the first saint, kneels over them with a look of graceful contentedness, a horrifying reaction to this loss of life. It appears that the 664th saint has been claimed. Will Ecclesia be the next? Unfortunately, we can't say. For in another cruel twist of fate, that's where the lore cards for this set end. Albaz stands alone against the hordes of Despia with only a sliver of the power of Mirror Jade to assist them, while Ecclesia grapples with the pain of loss. Our only hope lies with Kitt and the Springans, for if they can find a way to overcome the Therions and Splights, they may find the means to turn the tide against Dogmatika and their cursed brands. For now, though, I'd like to hear what you all have to say. What do you think the story has in store for us? And is there anything about the lore that you interpreted differently? Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to show your support, ring that bell so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with someone you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. And for those of you watching the premiere, make sure you check the link in chat to join the fundraising stream to help raise money for the Texas Equal Access Fund. And if you're watching at a later date, please make sure to check the description for a way you can donate as well. Today's episode was brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander Ashling Waltz, Nebula Navigators 3rd Dynasty, Avagule, Adam Zajdel, Benjamin Meisner, Biohazard 011, Eric, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Howling Zangetsu, Inblink, Ironic, John Manji, Julius Sneezer, Larakia, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Ruxith Sarani, Shooting Star 3300, The Fresh Prince of Conair, The Wizard Moose, Tyler Cranston and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders, Bear Sharktopus Studios, Chaz Ghost, Corbinisms, Cozy Boat 275, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Jesus Garcia, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Nitromo, RGS, Remti Bright, the Legendary Raven, and Too Much Desu, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. I'm only able to continue doing this thanks to the support of these lovely people, so if you'd like to be a part of these credits, as well as help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, please check out my YouTube membership or Patreon links in the description to see if I have anything you'd like on offer. And if this is the first video of mine you've watched on this subject, make sure to catch up with the Albaz Storyline with this playlist. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.